And we are recording with, and I'm gonna mess it up anyway, Mr. Christian Terhes, and I think I probably messed that up anyway. Um,
That's perfect.
okay, on Tuesday, January 14th, 2025 at 1:09 p.m. Eastern Time, Dr. Malone put me in touch with you, and you're talking about how you met with Senator Ron Johnson last week, talking about kind of the whole COVID debacle, fraud, the importance of transatlantic relationships going forward, and as well as RFK Jr. potentially funding the WHO, if not the HHS entirely. So, whatever's coming the next weeks and months, above all else, it will be interesting, and I don't think anyone can deny that. But
Clearly.
could you please introduce yourself, tell everybody who you are, and then we'll jump on into it.
Yes, I'm Cristian Terhes. I'm currently a member of the European Parliament representing Romania. This is my second term in office, elected in 2014 for the second term. Initially, the first term I was elected in 2019. Before that, I used to live in California for 17 years. I immigrated legally in the US. I got married there. I obtained my citizenship in 2007, US citizenship. And since then, I'm holding dual citizenship, Romanian and American. And on top of everything, as I like to say, I'm one of the very few registered Republicans in California.
But I think it's pretty much undeniable at this point that the tide is turning, right?
Well, up to this point, I mean, after the fires that happen in LA, we'll see what will happen in the next elections. I think hopefully the Democrats will be removed from office. They pretty much they destroyed the Golden State.
Which is impressive. And it's the actions are coming home now, right? There's
Yeah.
only it's like turning a cruise ship. You can spin the wheel, but and it might take a minute, but eventually the entire thing starts to turn, and then you see
Yes.
that it's very real. It's not just all ideas of progress and DEI and whatever. You're starting to see the real implications of the
Well,
rubber hitting the road.
here's the funny part. They used to call themselves progressists, and they claim that they want to impose or promote progress. But this is not progress. This is regress. I mean, there's in the communication classes in the US, we used to be taught that he who frames the argument wins the debate. So in this case, these left extremists, they like to call themselves progressists and claiming that they want to bring progress in the society. But look in all the countries and in the US, look at all the states and municipalities that they lead. I mean, there's no progress. I mean, go in San Francisco, for example. I mean, they will break your car. There are so many homeless people there that it's not even funny anymore. And hopefully now, more and more people are waking up and really understand that. I think they move certain things way too far, and we have to come back to uh, a more reasonable approach. I would say common sense approach that we really need on both sides of the Atlantic. I would say, especially now and hopefully now with Trump in office, that will be achievable as soon as possible.
What are the effects of something as someone who's grown up in the US and has never left the US? What is something like Trump getting in office? What are the actual implications for something like Romania? Like, at just how much does the current hegemon and whoever leads said hegemon, what effects does that like realistically have?
Well, first of all, let's look back at his first term in office. He clearly, in our opinion, had a successful term in office, not only for policies that effective, I would say, certain things related to internal politics in the U.S., but especially the external politics, foreign affair politics, let's say. I mean, during his time, there was no war. There was no, U.S. did not attack anybody. There was no country in the world that had the audacity, I would say, to attack another country. But if you look back, what happened before him and after him, under Biden, and what happened before him, the hell broke loose across the globe. Look what China was doing, and especially what Russia was doing. In 2014, for example, when Russia occupied Crimea and annexed Crimea, Obama was in office, and he did not even kind of strongly condemn that decision. He did not want to supply Ukraine with weapons of, advanced weapons. He sent them, pillows and bulletproof vests. That's it. When Trump was in office, we did not have the problems around the world. With Obama in office, what the many commentators and strategists are saying, uh, that withdrawal from Afghanistan, the way Biden did it, it looked very bad on the U.S. And Putin thought that, well, U.S. is very weak right now. Let's try my luck again. And that's how the war in Ukraine started, February of 2022. And look where we are right now. So with Trump in office, in his second term, I think certain things will change. I see that Russia is bleeding heavily right now. China is more cautious. They just imposed, I mean, the current US administration, Biden's administration, imposed new sanctions on Russia, for example. But clearly, this, especially the recent sanctions, they were imposed with the kind of approval of Trump. There are plenty of ships carrying crude oil around that nobody wants to buy anymore. So, I mean, the way he's using these economical methods, I would say, to impose, if you could say, peace through strength, it's clearly working. And as I said, if you look over the years when U.S. was perceived to be weak, then you had someone or some lunatics around the world that try to uh, see if they can either acquire territories from other countries, occupy other countries, or do many bad things. And unfortunately, that's what happened during Obama and Biden.
I think it's a kind of a rude awakening to people who maybe don't think that's the reality, but like it or not, good or bad, the objective reality of human civilization on this planet is power, is force.
And exactly. So it's very important how you use that force. I mean,
Correct.
I remember when because I was 11 years old when communism collapsed in Romania, and we used to listen a lot to Radio Free Europe and Radio Voice of America. That was our way of kind of hoping that one day that criminal regime is going to collapse. And I still remember, some of the speeches that Reagan used to have. And now in the past 15, 20 years, with so much access to the internet, to YouTube, to libraries, it's way easier to access information if you're interested in a subject. And during Reagan, for example, what was he very good at? He was at defining and using proper terms to define concrete realities. When he was asked about USSR, he was not afraid, for example, to call it as it was, an empire of evil. When he was asked, how do you think you're gonna the Cold War is going to end? And he replied, and I quote, simply, we win, they lose, end quote. I mean, he was so clever and so precise in the way he communicated that because he used, strong statements, uh, we saw what happened afterwards. I mean, without firing a single bullet, he was able to lead the Western world and the free world to win the Cold War without firing a single bullet. And I think that's something that we should also learn, especially nowadays. I mean, you see that China and Russia it's pushing for a new world order, the so-called multipolar world order, where they are perceived as, you know, uh, world actors, and they use their uh, soft power to some extent, bribing politicians, corrupting politicians, or the hard power, conquering territories like Russia is doing. And the only way to fight them is to be strong on values, the values that were the foundation of the so-called Western world. If us on the West, we are not committed to these values anymore, if we don't spread these values anymore, if we don't fight for these values anymore, they will win the argument. You remember what Reagan used to say, that freedom is just
One
one
generation.
generation away from extinction. So that's exactly where we are right now. It's the fight of our generation not only to preserve freedom, but also to pass this freedom to the next generation. We have to do that because other generations ahead of us did it. So with Trump is in office, going back to your question, this is also something that he has to build, I would say, because if in the first term he was very focused on issues related to internal politics and policies, now I think in his second term he can really build this legacy and be the next leader of the free world, exactly like Reagan used to be. And he has the capacity and the vision to do it, and nevertheless the power and the commitment to do it.
Do you think he has the ability to not only diffuse Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, but also prevent China and Taiwan? Do you think he has the ability to or at least delay what a lot of people feel is inevitable of a cataclysmic, you know, World War III of great power. What is it? Return of Great Power Conflicts. Yeah, that book. Do you think he has the ability to prevent that, or is it something bigger than that? Are we just with a global society? Do we have world wars every, once, twice a century?
Well, shortly, can he do it? Yes. Can he do it alone? Hard to do it. This is where the alliances are very important. And there's a strong, and historically there was, especially after even after the First World War, but especially after the Second World War, there was a very close relationship that was built between Europe and the United States. And if you look on the map, for example, especially now, even from a demographic perspective, it's very far hard for the U.S. to fight on all fronts, in Pacific and in Atlantic, to fight with China, to fight with Russia, with all this. It's hard. I'm not saying impossible, but it's very hard. And this is the reason why the NATO and the transatlantic relationship it's so important because you ask, for example, about Russia. Russia is using right now a very strong narrative, and is using a very strong narrative because it's very weak on the battleground. Not that Ukraine is doing better, but remember, Ukraine is a country that it's almost four times smaller than Russia. Nevertheless, when Russia started the invasion of Ukraine, everybody expected that in 3 days Ukraine is going to fall. Did not happen. So if a country that was four times smaller than Russia was able to not necessarily defeat, but to stop Russia from winning the war, that is showing you and proving that Russia is not as strong as it claims. These 2 years and a half or few months pretty much decimated the Russian military, not only from an equipment standpoint, but also from the number of soldiers. I saw on Twitter, for example, and I talked to some people that are very familiar with what it's actually happening on the ground in Ukraine. I mean, due to lack of soldiers, Russia is relying right now on soldiers from North Korea, which is kind of unusual and is raising a serious concerns from other perspectives, because now you can't say that what Russia is doing is pretty much a world war, but this is where we are right now. I saw that just in the past few days, Ukraine used drones very effectively, destroying many reservoirs of oil and gas in Russia. So Russia is bleeding heavily right now. If Trump is strong, and if he is not backing down, he is able to win this war without sending boots on the ground. Now, what's the other perspective? Let's say that U.S. and the West it's caving right now, thinking that if they offer a compromise to Putin for a while, at least Putin is going to stop. He's not going to stop. We know that historically, when the West was weak with Putin, he always took advantage of it. But we also know what happened before the Second World War. When Germany, for example, invaded and annexed the south part of Czechoslovakia, the southern part, uh, some of the Western countries said, well, okay, let's stop the war. Let's stop the amplification of the war. Let's have a deal with them. Let's sign a piece of paper. And they did. And it lasted like 3, 4 months. So the most important thing right now, based on what I see it, for Putin is to find a way how to buy time so he can replenish everything that he lost in Ukraine. And I think we should not allow him to do that. Ukraine was a sovereign country. Another important historical aspect here is the fact that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Ukraine was the third nuclear power in the world because many of those nuclear warheads uh, remain in Ukraine. And the West, as well as Russia, persuaded the leadership of Ukraine after 1991 to give those warheads, nuclear warheads, to Russia in exchange for a piece of paper
Hmm.
based on which Russia acknowledged, recognized not only the independence of Ukraine, the sovereignty of Ukraine, and territorial integrity of Ukraine within the borders that the country had in 1991 after the collapse of the Soviet Union. That thing happened in 1994 with the so-called Budapest Memorandum. So look what happened 20 some years later. Everything that they signed, they ignored and they violated. This is how the Russians were over time in history, and we should learn from the past, I would say. One of the reasons, for example, why Reagan said all the time, how do you deal with the Russians? Do you believe in everything they say? Well, he said the rule that I apply is trust but verify. So anything that they used to say, he sent someone to check. And he also said, when you deal with Russia, mainly walk slow and carry a big stick.
Mm.
So, I mean, this is the formal politics that they know, and we need to learn that from the past.
Do you think this is more indicative that either the great powers are more of a facade, or you could even say that they are powerful, but they can't use it because it's thermonuclear, and that, we look at the United States with, say, Vietnam, right? I think Nixon wanted to use the H bomb, and they're like, we can't do that, right?
Yeah.
Korea, right? MacArthur wanted to drop atomic bombs, and Truman was like, you can't do that.
Yeah, after he saw
Yeah,
what happened in
yeah,
Japan,
yeah.
it's
Iraq. No,
hard.
sure, no, sure, no. I would say from a humane place. Afghanistan and Iraq, we didn't, we could have launched a bunch of thermonuclear megatons from orbit the evening of September 11th. We didn't. We went and got involved for 20 years. Now I get it. There's the whole military industrial complex and, power positioning on the geopolitical world scale. But when you look at all those things, you could either say the United States handicapped itself because it didn't want to essentially use a policy of extermination. That's what thermonuclear weapons would have been against Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. But or you could say there is an absence of real power. They have the weapons, but other than that, they can't really use it. And we could maybe say, let's look at Russia and Ukraine. Why didn't it fall in 3 days? How come China hasn't just tipped over Taiwan? So it seems, I know this is a broad generalization, but it seems to be one of two things. It's either these countries are so powerful that they can't, you know, punch softly, so they don't punch at all, or it's all a facade. America, Russia, China, they're these big, mean, scary faces, but they actually can't really do anything. Are either of those true? Am I an idiot? And or am
No,
I an
no,
idiot?
I understand. I understand. I very much understand your point of view, but I see it, I would say, from a different perspective, especially now since I'm a member of the European Parliament and
Right.
I had the chance, to meet with many of my counterparts from across the globe and read many things. When you are a superpower, okay, you cannot just bomb the crap out of people, just send, let's send nuclear bombs everywhere just to show how powerful you are, because you will end up to a point where everybody's going to hate you and
Hmm.
turn against you. On top of that, what makes a power powerful, let's say, it's not the military power, it's the values that power or country, is trying to preserve on one side and trying to spread on the other side. So going back to what happened during the Cold War, the reason why, for example, both sides, USSR and US, realize that they cannot bomb of each other, nuclear bomb each other, because they will destroy the entire world. So the decision was, okay, we're not going to attack each other, but they fought each other through proxy wars here and there, right? Nowadays, because at least one side is perceiving the other side as being weak. This is the problem with the West. When the West is perceived, not necessarily that is weak, is perceived to be weak, the other side will try to push it and test, that weakness or strength. Now, what do you do in reply? Right now, we have a reaction, or, the West is trying to solve the crisis in Ukraine. But the question is, why that crisis started? We could have had many proactive actions, if you can call them, that would have prevented what happened in Ukraine. This is proving that every time in history, if you who you consider to be on the right side of the aisle, the correct side of the aisle, let's say, if you compromise on your principles, freedom, liberty, pursuit of happiness, democracy, rule of law, the other side is going to take advantage of it, and he will use that advantage against you. Look at the situation in Syria, for example. You might remember in 2013 or 14, when Obama was president, and Assad claimed that, or Assad was accused to use chemical weapons. And Obama said, well, that is a red line. If he crosses the red line, the hell is going to break loose. Well, afterwards, there were alleged chemical attacks, right, against civil population. What happened? Nothing. So if you don't do what you say you're going to do, the other side is going to perceive you as a weak country, let's say. This is the reason why I think what Trump is doing right now to rebuild the strength of the United States, especially by having strong public positions. I mean, if you read his positions and if you talk to Europeans, for example, not only Europeans, there's a lot of anxiety among diplomats and politicians, outside of the US, because they don't know what Trump is going to do. And I tell them, hey, just read, his vision. Look what he did during the first term in office. I think he's a reasonable guy. You can negotiate with him. You can get to terms with him. But obviously, you don't mess up with him because, that's how it is. So I think Trump will be able to achieve more for the United States by having this strong position, peace through strength, than Obama and nevertheless Biden did. And I think, coming back now to your question, if these countries are as powerful as they claim or not, I think when a country is undermining the values that was founded on, uh, becomes weaker by default. It's exactly like a country like a house that was built on a foundation. If you start hammering that foundation, if that foundation has a lot of cracks, the house is not gonna last for long. So look at the United States, for example. The American nation was not and is not a nation that was built on blood or land. It was the only nation in the world that was built on principles, on values, freedom. Give me freedom or give me that, for example. You will not find this in other nations. In Europe, for example, we fought with each other for at least 2,000-3,000 years here. It's not the case of the American nation, right? But exactly because of these values, if the American leadership is not embracing these values, not believing in them anymore, and not promoting them anymore, is making US weaker. I mean, which country in the world was the symbol of liberty? I'm asking rhetorically. Did anybody say, hey, I want to be, is Russia or China or Japan or any other country except the symbol of freedom in the world? No, it's US. But what is going to happen in the world if US is not promoting that anymore?
Hmm.
So this is where I'm not saying, to have an imperialistic behavior. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking is about witnessing and promoting, at the end of the day, humanistic values, let's say, that that shaped the Western world and made the Western world, the best place to live on Earth, which is the reason why so many billions of people want to emigrate in Europe and in the United States, you know. And unfortunately, in the past decades, many Western politicians they ignored and they disregarded these values. I mean, I remember during the pandemic, for example, I was the strongest voice in the European Parliament opposing the abusive measures that happened back then. I was not contesting the usefulness or the effectiveness of the so-called vaccines, the mRNA vaccines. I was not a doctor at that time in 2021. I did not have access to all the researches and stuff that you can access now. For me, it was a matter of principles because I said the following: if I'm an elected official and you're asking me to pass a law that one way or another is conditioning a human being to be vaccinated in exchange to walk
Hmm.
so-called freely, or to be able to go to work, or to be able to enter a restaurant, or even a hospital or a church. Now, this is creating a precedent in the society where the rule is not going to be the freedom, but the lack of freedom. So, from a right, freedom becomes a privilege
Hmm.
granted to you by the government. Because, right, the government can say, unless you have the digital green certificate or the COVID certificate, as it was called here, the QR code to prove that you're vaccinated or tested, you're not allowed to enter in certain places. Imagine that I was even back then an elected member of the European Parliament, and the rule was that you could not enter the European Parliament unless you show proof with this QR code that you are vaccinated or tested. Well, I was the first and the only member of the European Parliament, one out of 750 or 35, if I'm not mistaken, who refused to comply with that abusive regulation from the beginning to the end. At the end, they fined me. I received the highest fine in the history of the European Parliament, but I did not care. The most important thing was to stay strong and say, no, I'm refusing to comply with that abusive order because I really believe in this, values like freedom, uh, liberty, rule of law, democracy. But this is you have to do this, as a state at the end of the day. Because if nobody does it in the world, then there's nobody to promote freedom
Hmm.
anymore. It's exactly like when you bring light in the world. The Bible says that, be the light of the world. But how are you the light of the world? You have to do something that will create light. The lack of light is darkness. The lack of heat is cold, as Einstein used to say. So this is where we are right now. If we don't do this, if we are not promoting freedom and fighting for freedom, who is going to do it? If not now, when? And I think with what Trump did and does right now, the fact that he's emphasizing these values. I mean, I was listening to, especially to his late speeches. He's mentioning these values more often, which is very important. And nevertheless, we should not be afraid and ashamed of the Judeo-Christian values that were actually the foundation of the Western world. I mean, imagine that here in Europe, you will find many politicians and many parties that are even afraid that they are Christians. They don't want to mention the name at all. I mean, it's if you deny your heritage and your roots, then you're not gonna live for long.
Yeah, there has to be a place for promoting it simply for there has to be a point of coalescence. Oftentimes in an emergency or an evacuation, the first thing you do is just say, all right, everyone meet in this parking lot. Even if it doesn't mean anything,
Yeah,
it shows leadership, it shows an idea. Even if it's just an illusion that we know what we're doing, it
yeah,
shows an idea of we're gonna go do this. When I have a really busy day and I got a ton of stuff and I get flustered, I just I just start. I'm like, turn on the computer. All right.
yeah,
Here's the thumbnail. Okay. Start the dishwasher. Okay. And just one by one, you start moving, even if they don't seem like necessary or even related things. What does my dishwasher have to do with this podcast? Nothing.
yeah,
But it's a direction. It's a point of coalescence. So you're right. If we don't have that here, you have that nowhere. And if you don't have it anywhere, you have stagnation. And then all the people who are seeking liberty or freedom, we hold these truths to be self-evident. If you don't have a point of coalescence, they're dispersed and then, in strength in numbers. If you don't have the
yes,
numbers, you don't have the strength. So you have a bunch of people around the world that all want freedom and liberty, and you got nowhere to go. So
yeah,
there is real value in that. And even like you said about, I never got the COVID vaccine. I actually had Dr. Malone on July 1st, 2021. And that's what got me banned from YouTube and iTunes and all that, and Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, literally everything.
yeah. That
And
happened to me too. Yes, I
yeah,
know.
and
I had speeches. Imagine this. I had speeches in the parliament where I presented evidence from the
they
European
don't
Medicals
care.
Agencies, which is the equivalent of FDA in the States.
They don't
And
care.
I presented evidence, official evidence from an official institution. And I was banned because some fact checker said, well, no, it's fake news. I
Yeah,
mean, imagine that.
yeah. No, I'm with you. And that's why I had Dr. Malone on initially. I was like, maybe if I just get the guy that invented it, maybe we can, all have a sensible reaction. And that was stupid of me. I can't believe I thought that, that would apply. But even with that, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter if it doesn't matter if it wasn't a vaccine, if it was just saline. The reality is freedom is not a state given privilege. It is a
Correct.
God given right. It cannot, the government doesn't give you freedom. The government doesn't allow you to own guns. You are allowed to own that. You are a sovereign man. You are made in the image of the creator. You don't have to derive power from the state because the state is made up of people just like you and I who are flawed.
But not only that, there's a juridical principle here. What is the source of the right or whatever right? If it's the government, that means that it's not a right, it's a privilege. And
Hmm.
whomever gives you a privilege can take
Take
that
it away.
privilege away from you. I give you an example. The right to drive on public streets, is that a right or a privilege? It is not a right, the fundamental right. It's pretty much a privilege because we as a society, we said, okay, you got to have a certain age. You got to go through a test. You got
Yeah.
to, there are certain things. Even if you, after you obtain that privilege, you cannot exercise that privilege if you are not sober. If you have all these conditions, right? If you break any of these laws, or if you did not meet these conditions, you will not be able to drive. So that means it's not a fundamental right. It means that it's a privilege granted to you by the society, right? But when it comes to fundamental and inalienable rights, these are not privileges granted to you by the government. These are rights that you have, obviously, as being created by God in his image, that the government is respecting, is protecting, is cherishing, is safeguarding, but not giving. Now, here are the two fundamental views about the source of these rights. Us on the conservative side, we say that the basic fundamental rights, the source of these fundamental rights is, they derive from the fact that we were created in the image of God. So they are more like a gift given to us by God. The left side, which is basing its ideology on the Marxist philosophy, which was an atheistic philosophy, considers that the rights are not God-given rights. They are like privileges granted to you by the government. This is the reason why you will hear it. You saw it even during the pandemic, because it was good for the community. It is okay to have your basic fundamental rights violated. because you save the community. So the person, the individual, the human being did not matter anymore, but what allegedly mattered was the community, which is false. You cannot save the community by destroying the individual. This is exactly what the communists uh, used to do. And we should learn from these historic mistakes. For example, during the pandemic, I told you that I was the strongest voice opposing that. I was able to bring some of my colleagues around me and have some press conferences where we criticize what happened. And at one point, even to bring doctors in the European Parliament, including Dr. Malone and many others, to have a conference. It was called the International COVID Summit, the third edition. We held that in the European Parliament. So for a day, all these doctors from around the world, they presented their findings and stuff. So when we posted that online, YouTube removed the, the recordings because they claimed that they were fake news. So, I mean, I was just thinking the other day, if maybe all of these positions and all of these statements would have been left online, maybe people, would have made different decisions. Because at the end of the day, who are we as elected officials to push people to be injected with medical products that in some cases might produce side effects? This is what I've asked when we were told in 2022, if I'm not mistaken, or yes, when they asked us to vote for the digital green certificate, that QR code that proved that you are vaccinated or tested. I asked them, based on this draft bill that I'm reading here, people will not be able to exercise fundamental rights unless they show proof of testing or vaccination. And obviously, being tested every 48 hours, it was too much. So many people prefer to be vaccinated. But I said, this is what I asked, and I quote, can someone die from this vaccine? And the answer from one of these officials was, well, look how many people we save. I said that was not the question. I repeat the question. Can someone die from the vaccine? Yeah, but they can die even if they take an Advil. Well, that might be the case, but you're not forcing people to take Advil in order to fly a plane, for example, or to go to a hospital or to enter a mall or to go to work. So I restate my question. Can someone die? Hypothetically speaking, statistically speaking. And they said, yes, someone can die from these side effects. Yeah, but they are safe and effective. And I said, well, the problem is this. If you're saying that they are safe and effective, but still people can die. So clearly some people can die. How many do they have to die in order for you to acknowledge that there might be a problem with these vaccines? And they could not answer that. Well, then I said, you know what? I'm not going to support such a piece of legislation because the precedent that will be created in Europe is going to open the gates of hell. Look, we had in Europe a situation like this during the Second World War with all those concentration camps that were led by the Nazis, Auschwitz and many others. What many people do not know, or they might forget, is that in those concentration camps, many of those prisoners were subjected to medical tests, where they were pretty much destroyed just because some medical companies paid Hitler to use those people as guinea pigs.
Mm-hmm. I just
This is the reason why in Europe, at least, not in the US, but in Europe, after the Second World War, they came up with the so-called Nuremberg Code, but that was not a law-abiding code, let's say. But we had a convention a few decades after that called the Oviedo Convention, which is forbidding governments to pass laws, for example, that are forcing people to be, to take any kind of medicines and stuff, unless the decision is not based on a free and informed consent. So you need two conditions, simultaneous conditions, free and informed consent. So in order to be a free consent, it means that the government should not push you and pressure you in any way, shape, or form. And informed consent, that means that you are aware and you're told by the government all the implications of that medical product, which in our case during the pandemic, none of them happened. Not just one, none of them. People were forced to be vaccinated and they were pretty much manipulated by the government, claiming that those alleged vaccines, they were safe and effective. And I say alleged vaccines because that's what they said, vaccines. But if you look in the definition of a vaccine, it's a medical product that is supposed to uh, meet two concurrent conditions to stop the spread of the virus. That was one condition. The other condition was to give you immunity. So clearly, immunity did not give you because people who were vaccinated, injected with those medical products, they were reinfected after a few months. And as far as transmission of the virus, we had a case because we had a similar committee in the European Parliament, like the one, or pretty much close to the one that Senator Ron Johnson did in the U.S. Senate, fact-finding committee, kind of, not necessarily an inquiry committee, where we called all these pharma CEOs to tell us about the vaccines and stuff. So we also called Albert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer. He refused to come and kind of testify, but he sent one of his representatives. And when one of my colleagues, Robo Ross, asked the Pfizer representatives, have you tested your medical product for the transmission of the virus? She replied back saying, and I quote, we did not do it because we had to move at the speed of science, end quote. So imagine this. Now, we are in this situation right now, a few years after what happened during the pandemic, where the fundamental rights of so many people around the world have been violated. And I think we need to go back and learn from what happened. We need to really understand what happened with those injections, if these companies knew about their side effects. And nevertheless, as I constantly said it in the past 4 years, I think people need to wake up and do not elect in public offices politicians who pass laws to violate their basic fundamental rights, because here's something very simple. If they are disregarding your fundamental rights and God-given rights, clearly they will not care about your tax money and uh, you know public budgets and stuff like that. So
It's
we
also
need,
not an outlandish extrapolation to draw when you look at something like the response to September 11th, Patriot Act, domestic surveillance through the NSA, creation of the Department of Homeland Security, fusion centers. You doesn't mean 9/11 wasn't horrific, but when you look at the response to it and the existing response, it's 2025 and we still have these. It's been, I don't know, I feel old now, but it's been almost a quarter century and
yeah,
we still have these, and they're not going anywhere. No one has any doubt in their mind that the Patriot Act is just it's gonna go forever. It is not absurd to look at whatever it, let's say COVID wasn't a bioweapon. It was, but let's say it wasn't. Okay, sure, pandemic killed a lot of people. Absolutely, got to take drastic changes. Got it. The response from vaccine databases to lockstep censorship orchestrated by private companies with backdoors to the government, that is all a precedent, which came in the the wrapped up in the idea of we're saving grandma. Let's give
yeah,
them the benefit of the doubt and assume they're not demons. They are demons, but let's just pretend they're not. Okay, sure. That would never go away. That would never go away. And you saw with monkeypox or whatever thing they're trying to shill now. And it would just be, we're on a different timeline. We have, Mark Zuckerberg gone on Joe Rogan talking about how they're dialing back all this stuff. Elon Musk bought Twitter and released the Twitter files. But imagine if we didn't. You would eventually, slowly tighten your grip on these things to where Rumble would be censored,
yeah.
BitChute,
But
Brighteon.
even
Yeah.
the CEO of Rumble, I remember he complained. Even he complained about the fact that many EU officials tried to push him back then to
Yeah.
censor a lot of content.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
but you see, this is uh, an important role in this game. Let's say it's played by the regular people, by the voters. because we we passed what happened during the pandemic too easily, in my opinion. People who abuse the rights of millions of hundreds of millions of people across the globe, not only that they are still in power, they were voted again in power. Now, uh, in my case, I had this position in the European Parliament. I had diplomatic immunity. I had certain privileges, let's call them, due to my office. Uh, I My rationale was, well, if myself who really believe in freedom and I have to proclaim this and fight for this, I'm not setting a good example. How can I expect, regular citizen to do it who has to go to work and who has to be, subjected, to those kind of abuses? The problem on the other side is people too easily, forget what happened back then and re-elected many of those officials back in office, which for me is absurd. I would have never ever voted for a party or a candidate who supported the abusive measures during the pandemic, because if they supported something so inhumane back then, I have no guarantees that they really care about me and my family going forward. And this is something that we need to make people aware. Yes, there will be crisis in the world. I'm not saying that this COVID-19 pandemic is the last one. Obviously, there will be more because that's how the world is. But when you have a crisis, you need in offices people who are very pragmatic, very professional, I would say, and they are never ever compromising on principle and fundamental rights. Because if you look historically, all the tyrants of the world sold their tyranny to people,
Mhm.
lying to them and telling them that if they vote for them and they support their tyrannical measures, it's going to be better for them. So you give away your freedom and liberty for alleged security. And you get to a point after a while where you lose both freedom and security. And that's what happened during the pandemic. And I think we should learn from that uh, mistake in the history, not to repeat it anymore.
I think a real takeaway, at least personally what I've learned, I'm 34. Even just 5 years ago, if you had asked, it's the First Amendment under attack, I'd be like, no, we've had it for a zillion years. It's not going anywhere. And it's madness that we actually saw it under attack. And what it does is it makes you realize that these there's a reason why these civil liberties don't just spread up around the world. It's because they're rare. It's a form of power based on giving away power, which is very rare. It's even rarer that it happens in the United States, a landmass blessed with resources separated by oceans. I mean, to me, that's the proof of God more than anything. But what it really showed me is that this utopia we have, it's a lot more like a sandcastle in an incoming tide. You got to keep you got to keep building it up. You got to keep building. Sure, you can build a moat, but you got to keep adding. You got to keep the walls are falling. That's fine as long as you're at least adding the walls at the same rate that they're falling. It can survive, and sometimes it can get a little weaker, get a little stronger, but it's not something that just exists. It's something that is one generation away from being lost forever. And
Exactly.
that's terrifying, but it's just what it is. It's just a sobering, objective reality of examining it and going, okay, well, this is what we have to do. And it's something that's also it is worth fighting for. The United States, for its flaws, it is worth fighting for. It'll never happen again. You'll never see this weird engine of innovation and freedom and the ability to better yourself personally. It's crazy enough it exists. It's wild enough that it exists here. Like, why didn't it just exist in France and get bulldozed by some nearby empire? It's, this is a lottery ticket on top of a lottery ticket. It's not going to happen again. And it's very much worth fighting for. And You know, I think we saw with
Yes,
COVID, like, hey, it's not invincible, man. And they'll come again. They'll always come again next year, next decade, 10 years, 100 years, 200 years.
yes,
It'll keep coming, and that's fine, but you got to keep fighting. That's my stump speech.
exactly. Well, I mean, it's the society, it's moving constantly, and if you stagnate, the history is passing by you. And this is the reason why you have to be in a constant state of awareness and to continuously fight for these values, to make them, um, to make more people of your generation aware of these values, and then to pass them to the next generation. Especially us in Europe. I mean, imagine after the Second World War, with this European project that evolved over time in what is called the European Union. We did not have a war in Europe in the past 80 years. I mean, yes, we had a conflict in Yugoslavia, but Yugoslavia was part of Eastern Europe, on the communist side, I would say, and what we have right now in Ukraine, but that's it. I mean, it was unseen in history, for example, nations that hated each other for generations, like the French and Germans, after the Second World War, to sit around around the same table and decide that they are not gonna kill each other, but will find a way how to not only forgive each other, but how to reconcile with each other.
Hmm.
And they were lucky because they had visionary political leaders, Christian political leaders, which is very important, Catholics, Protestants, who prayed together, read the Bible together, and uh, came up with these policies that later on became politics, to bring peace through prosperity, as it was envisioned after the Second World War. I mean, it was specific to Europe. That project worked, but they started from the premise that, okay, let's go beyond these national differences, agree on certain things, understand that in order to grow and survive, it's important to respect each other and find a way how to conduct business together so everybody will be prosperous. And if they are prosperous, they don't want to kill each other. And it worked.
Yeah.
So, but as I said in one of my speeches, if this project was built on this great idea that you will bring peace through prosperity, clearly by spreading poverty in Europe, you're not going to save the project. Because right now, for example, with all these extra regulations, taxations, uh, left-wing policies that were implemented that are destroying the European economy, people are becoming uh, poorer. I mean, you see all these tensions all across Europe. This is the reason why. And it's just a matter of time before people from as individuals from hating each other. Just the next step is for nations and countries to hate each other and to fight each other. And this is the reason why every generation has to make sure that it's staying on the right track and it's passing these values to the next generation to follow the same good examples, I would say, of their predecessors.
Mm. Amen. Um, yeah, I think that's kind of it's like exercising or dieting. You get into it and you start to realize this isn't just like a thing you're doing. This isn't like a new journey you're on. This is just what you do now. It's just what
Yeah,
you go, I'm going to work out for 90 days. No, no, no. This is what you're doing now
that's just the beginning.
until you die. But I've been dieting.
Yeah.
You know, it's harder than getting the weight off, keeping the weight off. You're like, wait, it never ends. It never ends. And but it's just part of it. If it's something you want, then you'll go for it, and it is worth it. Um, but for now, we've been running for an hour, so I'm gonna say we wrap this up. Dude, I'd love to have you on again sometime. That was fun.
Anytime. I mean, I'm lucky that you when we agreed to have this show, I said I'm going to be in the European Parliament. So I had a hectic day here with negotiations with different files that we are working on. But it was a great pleasure, to
It
be on
was
the
awesome,
show. And
man. It's also a first for this show, broadcast to
Yes,
the European Parliament.
yes.
I highly doubt.
Next time I will walk you around the parliament.
I I
So,
hi- I highly doubt they're thrilled about me the
uh,
anti-vaxxer pro-America Tommy
well,
walking
you
through
will
the
see. You will be surprised. You will be surprised. Because I mean, I remember how he was. The people were looking at. I remember, we went to an official delegation. We have an agency here called FRA, Fundamental Rights Agency, right? This is a European agency that is supposed to kind of monitor if the countries are respecting the fundamental rights in the European Union. So I was part of the petty committee back then, the petition committee. So we went to an official delegation to visit this European agency in Vienna, in Austria. So I was sitting around, at the same table with the president of this agency, so we were eating, right? So at one point, someone said, well, how many jobs do you have? Jabs, And they start saying, three, four, five, two. And they came to me and I looked at them. I said, I'm unvaccinated.
I'm a rat.
Look, you know what happened?
They all ran.
the, those people that were around me, they moved like, 10 feet away. Oh my God, what do you mean you're not vaccinated? You should have told us, you infect all of us. Well, it was unbelievable.
God.
But, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, it's all fun and games until someone drops
yes,
dead of a heart
they
attack.
still remember that story, when I meet with them, man, I still remember you. You were the only one. I said, hey,
Oh,
man, guilty.
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
guilty. But so it's very important, even guys like you, to give the chance, to for people, to express their opinions, and the fact that so many people are listening to you, it's a good sign, that the tradition media, I would say, is dying right now, even all across Europe and all across the world, and freedom fighters, are growing. I would say their voice becomes stronger, which is very important.
It's yeah, it's a form of power that's not predicated upon power. It's a bringing people on and being like, yeah, talk your minds. Maybe I agree with you, maybe I don't, but I think a confident person's okay with hearing things they don't agree with. Like
Yeah,
I'm a white Irish guy, and I'm straight and I like the cold weather. I have no problem listening to somebody talking about how awesome Florida is. I don't care because I know what I like, I know what they like, and no part of me is
yeah,
like censor them. Don't talk about the beach. No, I'm like, yeah, go for it. And maybe they talk bad about the cold. I don't care because I'm this is for me, that's for them. If you're not confident in what you believe in and what you like, then you start scrambling to shut everything down that you don't like.
yeah,
Versus if you know who you are, you're fine with just letting in. I guess to some people that really is a terrifying prospect of just letting other people talk.
yeah,
I don't know. I don't if you really had to boil it down philosophically and spiritually, I'd say it comes down to self-love versus self-hate. I think that's what it really is, which boil that down further, it's are you closer to God or closer to the devil? So I don't
yeah.
know. Spoiler alert, that's what it all comes down to. But Christian, thank you so much for coming on here, dude. I'd
Thank you so
love
much
that.
for having me.
Yeah, man, I'd love to have you on whenever you want to come on. Yeah, walk me through the European
Anytime.
Parliament next time, and
I will.
I'll chant
It's a
USA.
lot of history. Look, it's a lot of history here.
Dude, I'd love to.
Uh, and especially for many Americans, it's important to remember this transatlantic relationship with
Yeah,
the European
where we
Union, with
came from.
NATO. Yes, and clearly we are stronger together than separate.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Um, but for now, dude, thank you so much for coming on here,
Thank you
guys.
so much.
Yes, sir. Please go to the
God
description,
bless you.
everybody. Follow him on Twitter. Dude, we'll do another one. Thank you so much for your time. God bless you as well. And it was a pleasure speaking with you.
Likewise.
Thank you, sir. Guys, thank
Bye
you so
bye.
much for watching.